I'm working as well. Can you hear me at the back? Man at the back standing up, can you hear me? Sweet. Thank you very much. All right. Welcome, everybody, to a talk on feedback. My name is Daryl. I'm from England. I'm a communication and relationship coach, and I work with people to overcome their relationship and communication challenges and deal with conflict. And joining me today is my lovely, lovely friend, Eliška.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Eliška. I'm originally from Prague, but we met with Daryl in Estonia. And I'm the person who likes to overcome these communication challenges, and also ex-software developer and currently Scrum Master. Well, tonight, or today, could we please ask you, so you don't sit so far away from us, we would like to interact with you. Please don't be scared, we're not going to bite you. Maybe sniff you a little bit.
You want us to stand on the stage then?
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't really like being on stage. I like being close to people.
Oh, we can do that.
Can you see me? Is that okay? Yeah, well, you can see us? Okay, cool. All right, have you all scanned the code? Get the Menti code, because there is going to be a degree of interactivity. So please scan that, because we want to hear your thoughts and feelings as we go through this. Good. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to have a look at feedback, what it is, why it's important, some of the differences and tricks and tips for giving good feedback as well as receiving good feedback. And then I'm going to leave you with a really obvious but important tip at the end. Okay? So here you go, your first opportunity to interact, and I would really love your thoughts and feelings. So I've got some feedback for you. How do you feel, and what are your thoughts if somebody says that to you? So if somebody says, Daniel, I've got some feedback for you. That face says it all. So use the Menti code if it's working. We're going to see if it's working, and then hopefully we'll have some responses.
Well, meanwhile, I can ask Daryl if I'm going to tell, I have some feedback for you. How do you feel?
I am used to it now, but I can tell you it didn't make me happy to begin with.
What about 15 years ago?
Oh, 15 years ago,
little Daryl?
Not at all. Didn't like it. Okay, so we've got some answers coming in. Eliška.
Excited. That is very surprising, and I'm glad to hear that, because we're all for feedback. And if you're excited, if we have the audience who is excited about feedback, that is actually exciting. But scared, curious, yes. Depends on the speaker.
That's a really good point. It depends on how it's delivered as well as how it's received. Eager, happy, surprised, nice, challenged, learning, lucky.
Lucky is good.
Ominous. All right, very good. So a really mixed bag of how we feel when it comes to emotion. Thank you for doing that as well. Responses still coming in, but that's great. So feedback, essentially, the way I like to look at it is that feedback is neutral. So a bit like a speedometer on a car. The dial just shows speed. The information is neutral. The data is neutral. It's up to you or up to me to decide what to do with that. So how do I interpret it? Do I speed up? Do I slow down? Or do I stop? So my invitation to you throughout this talk is just to see feedback as something neutral.
Well, you have shared with us your emotions, but I'm going to ask Daryl. I believe that there is science behind that, because every time, not every time, but in my previous feedback sessions, I felt maybe a little bit attacked or scared. And I believe that there's a reason behind that, and it's not just about my emotions, but there is a reason. Can you explain it to me, please?
Of course I can. So our brains are hardwired for survival. It's why we've done so well as a species up till now. And the reason is because we're constantly scanning our environments for threats. And that is the job of part of your brain called the amygdala. Any neuroscientists in the room? Okay, good. I'm going to destroy this, but you'll get the concept. So the amygdala is part of your brain which revolves around looking after your emotions, managing your emotions, but is also responsible for your fight, flight, and freeze response. So when it detects a threat, it basically floods your body with cortisol and adrenaline, which is great because it either primes you to fight or allows you to run away as quickly as possible. The problem with that is that it overwhelms the part of your brain that deals with logic, reasoning, and listening. So it's great, for example, if you are faced with a tiger and need to run away and escape. Not so great in other situations. Unfortunately, nowadays, most of us don't live in an environment where we have to worry about tigers. I certainly haven't seen any wandering around Prague. But the problem is, our brain doesn't differentiate between a threat to our physical self and a threat to our emotional self. So, emotional threats are things like stress, anger, fear, anxiety. And so if we see feedback as fear-inducing or stress-inducing or gives us anxiety, then we're going to feel those same physiological feelings as if we were being attacked by a tiger. Basically, it's just our brain's way of keeping us safe. Make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And I'm going to ask our audience, do you sometimes feel that you receive feedback better on some days? And then some days somebody will tell you just, oh, your semicolon is missing in your PR, and you just have a meltdown because it was the worst criticism ever, and you feel it and remember it vividly 5 years later? Is there somebody like that?
A few honest people in the crowd. Thank you very much. Love it.
So sometimes you can just stand on it, but sometimes it's gonna melt you down. And I'm sorry, but that's our bodies and our brains.
It's all physiological. All right, before we give a few reasons why we think feedback is important, we'd love to hear from you. Why is feedback important to you personally? And if you haven't joined the Menti, the code is just up at the top of the screen there. So why is feedback important? Or why do you think feedback is important? Better job? Trueness, interesting. Trueness, who wrote trueness? If you're willing to share, just what does trueness mean? Interested? If you're not willing to share, that's okay. Come to it at the end. Fairness, we can be better people, improve and learn, progress, improvement, personal development, learning, improvement, yeah. In order to improve something, you need to know how it can be improved, yeah. All good. I think anything unusual there?
No. Well, I'm going to ask you, do I actually need feedback? Would I be happier just living in my bubble without any, words against me or people who hate me or hate my work? I'd be very happy without anything negative coming towards my way. Isn't it true, Daryl?
Yeah, I mean, our brains, as I said, are primed for negativity, but we'll touch on that in a little bit.
Can I just point out the one down there?
Which one?
I can finally know what my girlfriend is thinking. Yes,
Okay.
Communication in relationship, that's the basics.
Yeah. I've not had that one before, but I like it. I like the honesty as well. Okay, interesting, my colleague's way of thinking, I love that. What is that other person's perspective? How do they view a situation? And blind spots as well. Super. You've covered it all, basically. So there are 3 key benefits. There are many, many others, but I just honed it down for the sake of this presentation. So self-awareness. Somebody mentioned it there, blind spots. We all have blind spots. We all have things that we don't know, and that we don't know that we don't know. And by getting somebody else's perspective, it shines a light on those areas and just allows us to improve. Dialogue. Again, by opening up a dialogue, we can figure out what's working, what's not working, and allows us to make a change. It also stops things from festering and getting worse over time. And then the last one, development, as you pretty much everybody wrote down there, allows us to grow and develop. Now, the biggest complaint in a lot of organizations, hopefully not too many people here, I think 70% of people, according to Gallup, are unhappy with the lack of development or lack of feedback that they get, which then allows them to grow and develop in their role. So super important. And,
I have a story for you, Daryl.
Tell me.
When I was a junior developer, I still remember this week, we had a project which was very time-consuming, was very difficult, and I did a couple of PRs, and on every PR, there was a feedback. But I still feel it, I still remember it 15 years later. It wasn't pleasant. It made me do the better job, but I still remember it. But of course, with that work, I also received a lot of positive feedback that I did a good job. We finished the project. We delivered something with a great business value, but I still have the emotion inside of me that as a junior developer, I did something really bad And why does the emotion still sticks and stings?
Why does the bad memory stick?
Yeah.
It's interesting actually you use that word. So there's a psychologist by the name of Rick Hansen. He said our brains are like Velcro for negative experiences and like Teflon for positive experiences. Basically, it takes 3 positive experiences to offset 1 negative experience. So you have to think about the balance of when people are giving feedback. Oftentimes it is heavily weighted toward, let's say, the less positive side, and that's why our brains tend to remember it more, which is why I've put this ratio of 5 to 1. So I like to categorize things in 2 types of feedback. You've got the motivational and then the developmental. So motivational, this is really about encouragement, about building up that person's confidence. And then the developmental is, okay, how can I improve my skill set? How can I improve my competence? And the ratio of 5 to 1, this doesn't have to be in every single instance, but over the course of the relationship, you really want to be praising people far more than you are focusing on the areas where they're weak. There was a phrase when I was a teacher many, many years ago, and actually the ratio was 7 to 1. And this was really hard because I taught it in
sorry, everyone.
In a city school where kids were not great. But the phrase that stuck with me was catch them being good. And so you really want to try and look out, when can I find opportunities to praise my colleagues or my peers, or actually even my manager as well? Because this is something that often we don't do. We forget actually to give feedback up as well as down.
Well,
Make sense?
Yeah, and I have another question. Well, pardon my French, but anybody heard about shit sandwich? Yeah, some of you. Okay. So for those who haven't, so there's a technique of feedback called sandwich method. We call it shit sandwich because, well, I'm going to explain why. Basically, you have 3 stages of feedback. First one is on the positive note because you want people to listen to you. You don't want to start with the negative, so they would shut down immediately. But then you follow with the criticism or developmental feedback as we want you to learn. So you actually share something for the improvement. And then the last one is also positive, so they would leave happy and they would not feel like you criticize them all way. So this is the shit sandwich. Can it work?
I think the clue is in the name. But it can work for some people because some people like that. I was working with a friend of mine and I was breaking the feedback down. Something I didn't say is delivering the feedback. My preference is if you want to give motivational feedback, give motivational feedback and be really clear about it. And then if you want to give developmental and be really clear about that as well. And be clear about the distinction. But I was giving her feedback that way and she said she didn't like it. And I was like, oh, okay, well, how do you want me to give it to you? She said, tell me something good, then tell me something I need to improve, and then tell me something good. I was like, okay, fine. So it's based on people's preferences. The reason I would say to avoid that is twofold. If you say something good, but somebody knows that something not so good is coming, then they're going to feel that it's a bit disingenuous and inauthentic. And oftentimes they'll just ignore that and say, you were just buttering me up to get to what you actually wanted to tell me. That's one. The other is you can say something nice to somebody, then tell them what you want to tell them, which is really important. This is the change you want to see. And then you tell them something nice, and the person walks away thinking, it was all fine. They started with something great, they ended with something great. I don't need to do anything differently.
So do we need to follow up with some action items after the feedback?
100%. We'll touch on that in a bit. Okay, so for those of you who like a little bit of a structure and a little bit of a model, this is a structure and a model that I quite like, although the screen really isn't great. So it's called the AID model. So action, impact, desired behavior. And actually, I just need my notepad because I have an example.
I can give it to you.
Oh, you can give it to me. Oh, you're sort of high tech there. Nice. Okay, so a piece of feedback without using this model, for example, was you gave me the report a day late. Nope, that's not true. That is in the AID model. So, okay, so your arrogance is causing a problem. Not particularly useful piece of feedback. But if I were to translate it into the AID in terms of action, impact, desired result, it would become, you interrupted me in front of the client, very clear action, very specific, which meant I felt that they lost their trust in us. Very clear about the impact as well. And then desired result, in future, please allow me to finish speaking. So it just gives it more structure and takes the personal element out of it, makes it more objective. Instead of, that was really great, because I've heard that many times in terms of feedback. Hey, good job. Okay, what?
Good job, Daryl.
Thanks. Useless. So for example, action, impact, desired behavior, action. Your presentation was really well structured and cohesive. Impact. People in the audience clearly got value from it. Desired result. Please keep up the great effort, work, and consistency and deliberate nature of your presentations, or something to that effect. Very clear. Thank you. Does that make sense? Just action, impact, desired behavior, and it can work for either motivational or developmental feedback. So giving some feedback tips. Do you want to?
Well, I would start not using the shit sandwich, probably.
Yes. Number one. Data. Try and have as much data as possible. Don't make up stories or interpretations. Have facts, have examples. This helps, again, from a developmental and from a motivational perspective, because people can then take that and do something with it if they choose to. Be specific. Make sure it's measurable. Make sure it's meaningful. Make sure it's unambiguous, because, again, they can then do something with that information should they choose to. And don't assume everything is your perspective. Check in, have a conversation. Feedback should be a collaborative approach to doing something differently. Anything you'd add?
Well, I would like to ask you what it actually means. What does it mean to have data for the feedback?
Okay. Let's take the example of, okay, let's say you were late to a meeting.
Oh, I'm sorry, again.
I could say, Eliška, you're always late to meetings.
Yes.
Story, generalization, unuseful language. However, if I then said to you, Eliška, you've been 10 minutes late for the last 4 meetings, that's being specific, that's data. You can't argue with that. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Don't be late.
And can we apply the don't assume on this situation?
So with that one, I would probably want to ask you some questions. Hey, I've noticed you've been late to the last couple of meetings. Is everything okay? What's going on? Tell me what's up.
And if you would assume, what would that look like?
I might think, for example, she's always late, she's so lazy, she doesn't care about this project, she's just not interested, and that's probably going to sour my relationship towards you as well, which obviously I don't want.
So do we see the difference between those two?
Yeah.
Have you ever accused your colleague or friend of being lazy or late because they don't want to get up, but they had a sick kid at home? No, I know there are. You don't have to know the reasons, but let's not assume.
Yeah, ask, find out. I would always, my default is apply curiosity, to ask questions, because we think from our own perspective, but we don't know what's going on for the other person. All right, over to you again. What is your experience of receiving feedback? Has it been a good experience? Have you enjoyed it? Have you received great feedback? Have you struggled? Have you had examples of bad feedback? Up to you. Let's hear. Go on.
Yeah, I would like to also ask if you ever received a confusing feedback.
Ooh, that's a good question. That's a good add. Vague. Mostly helpful. Wow. That is an awesome answer. Breathtaking.
Usually not specific enough, and the frequency wasn't great either. That's actually a great example, especially at the working environment. If you want to develop your professional skills and you don't receive the feedback from relevant people, how are you going to develop? How are you going to move forward and be better?
That's a really interesting one. Too positive to be useful. Wow. That is, I've never seen that before. Well done for getting positive feedback, but it's definitely a conversation to be had. Thank you that you love me so much. I just need it to be more specific. So genuine or buttering up. So again, possibly the shit sandwich element there. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Thought-provoking, joyful. People take it as a formality. That's a really good point, actually. For some people, it can come across and it can feel that way if it's a tick box exercise. It should be done because you have a genuine care for the betterment of that person. Otherwise, there's no point, and it's felt as well.
Oh, I like these two. Sometimes just a facade for dumping unhelpful criticism, and manipulative.
Yes.
Manipulative feedback.
Yeah, it can be that as well, if done incorrectly. And, I mean, people are nodding, so we can definitely empathize with the fact that we've potentially been on the receiving end of all of these types of feedback. Okay, so some receiving feedback tips. Should I stay in one place? Am I just annoying you by wandering around too much? Sorry. All right, listen respectfully. You might disagree with the feedback, but that person has taken time out of their day to hopefully deliver something that they think is going to be impactful and meaningful to you. So just listen to it. You don't have to agree with it. And ask questions. Be curious. Okay, great. So what made you think that? Or where did you get that information from? Or what would you do in my position? You can just dig a little bit deeper rather than accepting it at the surface level and try and find out what was behind their thinking. And that just gives you more information with which you can then make a decision and then hopefully take action. Because at the end of the day, if you don't take action, nothing changes. So it's down to you to choose whether you to do something with it or choose not to do something with it.
I'm going to add, with asking the questions, it correlates with don't assume from giving the feedback. It's the same thing. If you're being on the receiving end of the feedback, don't assume that it's all bad or that the person is just going around the core of the problem, or that there is actually a problem. It doesn't have to be. And because we feel that sometimes we don't do such a good job, we assume a lot, even when we are receiving the feedback.
Very important. And I do like the don't assume, because it makes an ass out of you and me. The little analogy with the words. So,
do we have the picture for the ass?
No,
yeah.
I didn't keep that in there. And the tip that I would leave you with, or we would leave you with, is ask for feedback. I was talking to Artem. Where's Artem? There. So asking for feedback. And we were having a conversation with, if you don't mind me sharing, I'm just going to share it briefly. Sweet. Him and his manager. And he was saying, okay, well, my manager gives me mainly negative feedback, or it's not very constructive. And it's like she forgets to give the praise thing. So as well as for asking for feedback, it's very important that we tell somebody how we like to receive feedback. Because otherwise, they're just going to do it in the default method that works for them. But for example, I don't like public praise at all. I've been praised in public for some things, and I just don't like it. And so I've had to tell somebody, if you want to praise me, just take me to one side and say, hey, really good job. And the same, when I'm receiving feedback that's developmental, I need it to be really specific about, okay, what did I do, when did it happen, and what can I do differently? Some people might just be, good job, Eliška. And that, even despite what I said earlier, for some people that works, which is why all of this is general information, but then you have to personalize it to that particular individual.
Anybody a parent? Do you have some parents?
So the weary hands going up. So, oh, God, yes.
So how do you give feedback to your kids? Do you call it feedback or parenting? I'm going to ask you because you feel like you're very friendly with me.
I probably don't call it any. I don't call it feedback or parenting. I just talk to them as I see fit, and I never thought about giving it a name.
Do you say good job to your kid?
Yes, sometimes. Sometimes they surprise me by doing things on their own, and that is something that deserves a lot of praise in order to make them realize that it's appreciated.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for being a good parent.
He hasn't received much praise recently, so that was nice. But that's really good what you mentioned, because you're reinforcing positive behavior. We all like to know that we've done things well, so the more that we can reinforce those behaviors, the more we're going to want to do them. But yes, ask for feedback regularly. So summary, be curious, ask questions. Remember, there's two types of feedback, motivational and developmental. If you want to give motivational, give it separately and be intentional about it. If you want to give developmental, do it, give it, be intentional about it, and separate the two.
I would just like to emphasize, because I love the wording, it's not positive and negative feedback. It is motivational and developmental. And if you switch it in your brain, if you switch the language, it can do a lot of impact. And that's why I love it so much. So if there's this one thing you should remember, it's this one.
Very true. Thank you. I'm glad you like it. But the reason why it wasn't me that came up with it, it was a company I used to work for. We talked about the fact that our brain has a negativity bias. So if you already think that somebody says, oh, I've got some negative feedback for you, your brain is already shutting down, you're already creating distance, you're already putting up barriers, you're already in defensive mode. And so you're not really as open to hearing what they might have to say. So by reframing it and saying developmental, okay, this is for my betterment. This is for me to develop, to grow, to learn, to get better. Then it helps us to access that information a little bit more readily. Okay, we have a few minutes left for questions, and if we know the answers, then we can give them some answers.
Do we have the Slido? Or...
Ah, that's very, very sweet. Thank you. Questions? This question, go. You stay there.
I'm gonna be here telling Finnish jokes. I only know one.
Hello,
Yes.
thank you for the presentation. I have a question. You developed it quite well, the part of the 8, so I would call it positive criticism to have that chance. But when do you know the limit has been reached from a managerial position? Basically, how far can you be positive and not feel like you are being abused by your worker when you are in that responsible position? How to handle that, how to identify the cues of what you might assume someone is assuming to take positive criticism, but it's actually just letting it go. It's like you said in the shit sandwich example, oh, it started positive, then negative, then positive, it's all fine. So how to assess like cues for, see if they are just taking it in, like actually the criticism in a positive way, or just taking advantage?
It's a very good question. Anyone else experience the same thing? Just curious? Because I would imagine you're not the only one. So my response would be to check and say, okay, what did you understand? Or what did you hear? Or what do you think about what I just told you? And then you'll get an immediate response. Asking them to repeat back exactly what you said can be a little bit aggressive. It depends on how you do it. If you just ask them, cool, what did you just understand from, or what are you taking away from what I just told you? They will then tell you, and you can check. Okay, did that align with what I told them, or did it not? In which case, you can then dig a little bit deeper. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Cool. Sweet. Thanks for the question. Anyone else? Oh, I'm going to go, yeah.
Hello. Thanks for the talk. Myself, as a developer, I mostly relay feedback through pull requests or merge requests when I do a code review for my colleagues or junior developers. And that feedback, I think, by nature is more developmental than motivating. I try to make it motivating. I try to blend it, so one feedback can be both motivational and developmental, but it's not always that easy. Do you have any tips for feedback in code review specifically?
Yeah, if I can add to that, because I was at that position. If you are specific, and the best thing is if you do a comparison with the good stuff which either happened before, or if you compare, for example, the same technique they used before, and it's good, you point out also on this one, because it can be very frustrating only commenting on the PRs with like, hey, this is not up to our standards, but you can offer, hey, let's do a pair programming for half a day, and we can align and we can understand each other and take it as a chance to improve and not to be upset that you're not on that level or that your person is not on that level. It can get frustrating, but also if you understand and you speak the same language, and I'm not talking about the like like language, but you have the same terminology, you are on the same frequency or on the same level of understanding, it can be so much easier to receive and give feedback on this level. And if you're talking to juniors who tends to be, for example, more prone to shut down when they get the feedback, just, let's not do the shit sandwich, but, like, hey, this is your good qualities, and this is just like a little bit which we can improve step by step, and it's gonna be also good. Like, you're not complete waste of resources. That's what, we wouldn't have you here, but this one just needs a little bit of tweaking, and it's gonna be good. And then we can move to other one. So it can be turned into positive, basically.
I would just add a smiley, but that's me. I think I just want to be respectful of people's time. So we had half an hour. We did start a couple of minutes late. We've gone on for a couple of minutes. I just want to end the talk. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, but I'm going to hang around for questions. So I think there were a couple of other hands. I think Eliška is going to hang around for questions as well, but I just want to be respectful of people's time. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you all.